Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking a look at something deeply, human. We're diving into the profound and often completely hidden wisdom that's buried in our absolute darkest moments of grief and loss. We'll be drawing on a fascinating discussion and a series of really powerful poems that examine exactly how we handle, and honestly often mishandle, our deepest emotional pain. We're going to map out what happens when we try to outrun our suffering, and more importantly, how we can actually navigate it gracefully.
So, think about it. When you feel deep, crushing pain, what's your first instinct? Do you sit with it, or do you run? Let's be totally honest here. Literally, nobody feels the onset of intense grief and thinks, oh great, I should just sit with this. No way. Our innate human instinct is to avoid that suffering at all costs, right? We just want to run, hide, do absolutely anything but feel it.
Section 1. The instinct to escape. Why our brains predict the worst.
You see, our minds are actually just trying to protect us. When grief hits, the brain basically predicts that the incoming pain is going to be so intense it'll literally break us. It tells us, you won't survive this, so it screams at us to recoil. There's this powerful line from a poem called The Great Escape that hits the nail on the head. Running from that pain inside, denying, numbing, and avoiding, it has nowhere to go. And that's the thing. When we suppress that pain, it doesn't just poof, vanish. It gets trapped inside us. It's kind of like a bad smell locked in a room that just won't go away, eventually morphing into this lingering anger or bitterness.
The harsh reality? Avoidance solves absolutely nothing. Whatever is causing that pain is still just sitting there, waiting for you to actually show up and be present. And worse, by deflecting it, we're completely silencing the wisdom. Grief has so much to teach us about our new reality and identity. When we use all these clever little tricks to shy away, we completely miss out on that profound learning.
Section 2. Coping versus managing. The toxic loop of survival mode.
When we refuse to just sit with reality, our avoidance tactics start running the show. We fall into this constant agitation, leaning on external stuff just to survive Tuesday. And there's a really brilliant distinction here in the source material between coping and managing. Coping is basically a cover-up. It's barely surviving, sagging under expectations, just trying to stay in the game. It constantly needs propping up. Managing, on the other hand, think of it like managing a business, means understanding the harsh reality, deploying the right resources, and actively processing things so you can actually thrive. Simply put, coping keeps you stuck, while managing moves you forward.
But when we choose coping over managing, we almost always turn to distractions. There's a poignant quote from the poem Chemical Sea that says, "My brain is drowning in chemicals, peddling temporary reprieve." Now that doesn't just mean literal chemicals or addictions, though it totally can. It could mean throwing ourselves relentlessly into work, doom scrolling, shopping, anything that numbs the brain. The problem? It's temporary. You've just made the pain secondary and created a brand new, massive problem for yourself.
Let's walk through how this toxic loop actually plays out. Step 1, you try to avoid the pain of grief. Step 2, you use some device or distraction to numb it. But over time, and this is step 3, you're going to need a bigger and bigger dose of that distraction just to stay numb, which drags you right into step 4, where the nightmare feels permanent. Your original grief is still completely unresolved, but now it's tangled up with the toxic side effects of your distraction, making the whole shebang infinitely worse.
Section 3. The purpose of pain. Redefining our internal alarm system.
To break out of that awful loop, we have to totally flip the script on how we view pain. We have to stop seeing it as the enemy and start recognizing it as a vital, even redemptive part of being human. Imagine a young boy born completely unable to feel physical pain. Sounds like a superpower, right? Well, not exactly. At 1 second, he touches a hot stove. At 2 seconds, because he lacks that pain warning system, he doesn't pull away. By 5 seconds, severe, irreversible damage. Pain was supposed to be the wisdom shouting, hey, don't put your hand there. Without it, the consequences are disastrous.
And that brings us to the actual definition of pain. It is simply a necessary human warning system. It's a flashing red light signaling that something is wrong and desperately needs our attention and care. Whether physical or emotional, tricking our brain to ignore that alarm doesn't put out the fire. It just lets the unseen damage spread while we look the other way.
Think about this physical analogy for a second. Let's say you've torn your Achilles tendon. You essentially have 2 choices. You could pop some heavy painkillers, completely numb it, and keep running, which obviously destroys the tendon entirely. Or you could acknowledge the pain, rest, do your physical therapy, and actually heal. Numbing emotional pain just to keep up your daily status quo, it's exactly like running on a torn tendon. It is fundamentally destructive.
Section 4. Our innate resilience, surviving the fire.
Once we grasp that we actually need to listen to the pain, we have to override the brain's false prediction that this pain is going to destroy us. We have to realize we are entirely capable of withstanding the fire of grief. There's this incredible verse from the poem Unbreakable that goes, "Get out was the shout, the house is on fire, still you are here, the untouchable dweller." I love that. It's a reminder that even when destruction feels imminent, even when life is unbearably hot and you feel totally depleted, there is a deep, indestructible life force inside you. You are that untouchable dweller. You can absolutely weather the storm.
But here's the catch. Weathering the storm requires acknowledging that there is a fire in the first place. The source material shares this wild anecdote about a neighbor whose house was literally catching on fire. The alarms were blaring, neighbors were pounding on the door, the fire brigade showed up, and her response, "Don't disturb me, I'm okay." Talk about denying reality. True resilience isn't ignoring the fire alarm. It's sitting with reality, feeling the heat, acknowledging the profound loss, and eventually finding a new purpose on the other side.
Let's contrast these two paths really quickly. Numbing the pain requires constant distraction, leaves your grief totally unresolved, and honestly, just prolongs your suffering. Sitting with the pain, though, it integrates the wisdom of what happened, it fosters genuine acceptance, and beautifully, you eventually get to use your survival story to counsel and encourage others walking in those exact same shoes.
Section 5. The myth of time. Why the clock alone won't save you.
Okay, we've all heard the old cliche, time heals all wounds. Well, that idea needs to be completely challenged. The clock alone is never going to save you from unresolved grief. This truth is beautifully captured in the final poem, Time to Heal, where time is personified and says, "I possess neither the power for healing nor the acumen for teaching. I am the space within which these exist. Healing and learning are the preserve of your intelligent design. I am time, your ticket to ride. Time itself possesses zero magical power to heal us."
The absolute key takeaway here is this. Time is merely a space. If you spend that time distracting yourself, numbing your brain, and outrunning reality, you're just stagnating. The days pass, sure, but healing doesn't happen. Healing relies entirely on your body and mind's intelligent design doing the heavy lifting. And that internal design, it can only go to work if you are actively present, sitting with the pain, and allowing the process to unfold in the space that time provides.
Which brings us to our final thought. The pain of grief is just an unavoidable part of the human experience. It's a warning system, a harsh teacher, and ultimately your pathway to deeper resilience. But the journey requires you to actually show up. So I leave you with this to really think about. If time is just a space, what are you doing with yours? Are you using it to run, or are you using it to heal? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.